Welcome to Women and Resistance, a powerful podcast where we honor the courage, resilience, and revolutionary spirits of women across the globe. Hosted by Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, we uncover untold stories of defiance against systemic oppression, whether colonialism, racism, sexism, or economic injustice. From historic icons like Winnie Mandela and Fannie Lou Hamer to today's trailblazers, we shine a light upon those shaping a more just world. This is a call to honor the past, embrace the present, and build an empowered future. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of Women and Resistance. This is the podcast where we showcase women who have contributed to our liberation, and our little way of saying thank you is to recall not just their experiences, but some lessons we as the present can actually learn from what they experienced and how we can also channel that into our everyday lives. So this is a rather unique episode in the sense that we've done 12 episodes and we're going to basically review the shows we've done, rub minds with you in the audience.
Get questions from the audience.
Yes, hopefully get questions. But manners. My name is Adesoji Iginla, and with me, as usual, is Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire. She is the brain behind this whole...
Esquire is not my name, but okay.
Did I say Esquire? I said Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire.
No, yes. It sounds like it's part of my name.
Yes, it's your honorific, and once you put in the work, one should embrace all the goodness, as they would say. So she's the author of Your Self-Love Revolution, also Kwanzaa, a celebration. She is the host of Rethinking Freedom. I think you want to see the last episode she did, and I will hold it there. And she's also the co-host of what we're currently having, which is Women in Resistance. So, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. How are you doing tonight?
Yes, I'm fine. So, another 12 done. 12 to come. But before we get into the next 12, let me ask you a question.
Lord.
Yeah, no, questions. Yes, every other week you go, I said every other week. Every week you go into some sort of mode into understanding, embodying these unique women, great and unique women. Whilst you're going through them and you lift one hat and put another one on, the question would be, do you have some sort of withdrawal symptom from the previous going into the next, or you just basically take off the hat? It's like, that's done, and just,
With the spirit of these women, or the spirit of these ancestors, for those who are ancestors, we have covered some people who are still alive. There's no taking off hat, wig, makeup. They are now a part of me. And from time to time, I can sense them. One of them, I was telling them, listen, you're not going to get me. You're not going to get me disbarred.
Yeah.
Because these women were very courageous. They were very bold. Of course, some of them paid for their truth telling with their lives. So this is like really serious work that they were doing. Many of them were ostracized. So they all still sit with me and show up at different times. So there is no taking off the hat and putting on the hat. Now, for some of them who feel a little heavier, I have to tell them, okay, like you can't put that energy on me, permanently. And sometimes I will do cleansing rituals just to try to free myself a little bit. So, yeah. But they stay with me.
Okay. Speaking of staying with you, for me, let me.
Yes. How do you interact with them?
For me, the first one, I won't say the first one. I would say the one that really stayed with me in the course of this season was the conjoined twins. Because
Millie and Christine McCoy.
Millie and Christine McCoy, yes, and their mother as well. Mother played a huge role. Yeah, played a huge role. And the reason that stood with me was again, one of the things we do is also place these women in their time and context. So imagine you have, as if the cloud of racism is not difficult enough. You now have a conjoined set of twins.
Who are stolen at 10 months.
At 10 months. And then turned into some sort of a freak show for the entertainment of the oppressors. And then mother has to go across the world to go and rescue same mothers. But the really traumatic part for me was when one of them passed on and the other literally have to die with them. That for me is the kind of, you look at that time as if that time was not difficult enough. That experience in itself just sort of shows the interaction between racism, women, and their very existence in that course of time. So that for me was unique. Someone, Lorna posed the question.
Having said that, for those who don't remember Christine and Millie McCoy,
yeah.
Nonetheless, and that's what makes their stories even so much more amazing, is experiencing all they did, all the assaults, because mind you, every time they're examining them, fingering them, all kinds of,
violations
that they put them through. By the time they got to adulthood, they were multilingual. They negotiated their own bookings. They owned property and eventually bought back the plantation that their parents had originally worked on. And then they funded Black schools and churches. And so their story really, for me, emphasizes agency, regardless of everything that the system threw at them. There are some of us who are curled up in fetal positions right now, dealing with depression and I'm not trying to give a hierarchy of suffering, but if there were people who lived who deserved to just say, just shoot me now, life is over, it has no meaning, it should have been them. Yet they turned all of that, they sued in court, they still took agency in that time. And then turned around and didn't just say, well, okay, I can live a comfortable life. They use their resources to open ways for other people. And that for me is extremely instructive. If they could do all of that with the hand that they had been dealt, what's stopping us?
Good question. Lorna has a question for you. She wants to know what was your favorite or memorable this season?
Oh my God, I was thinking about that. Just got out of court not too long ago, but I was like, okay, someone might ask that question. So what's really funny is, or not funny, haha, but in trying to tell the story of Monamia and Chrissy and Millie McCoy, right?
Millie.
My goal initially was just to tell the story from the mother's perspective. But then Millie and Chrissy were like, no, it's our lives. We want to talk. But then I was like, okay, this isn't television. How are both of you going to talk? And I hadn't resolved that answer, that I had not resolved, what my response to that question was by the time we went live. And so whatever you guys saw, and I never go back and watch these things just because, but whatever you guys saw was truly in the moment. I recall like moving my head or whatever, like I know when I was getting dressed, they wanted me to wear 2 different earrings because in their lives, they still showcased their individuality. And I was like, well, what are we doing with 2 different earrings? Fine. Because I'm always rushing before we get on screen, And so I did the 2 different earrings, but it was a revelation to me as well once we went live of both of them talking but it's just me. I knew that I was going to take the scarf off, reflecting, okay, we've moved from the mother to the child. But I wasn't expecting to go back and forth or that they would be trying to have a conversation. So in real time, when that was happening, I was like, okay, this is weird, but I can't even react in that moment. When we go live and they show up, I'm just going with the flow with whatever they come up with. But in terms of who was most memorable for me, of course, all of these women are phenomenal. Just to remind you all, we had Mary Fields as well. We had Josephine Baker. We had Elizabeth of Toro, who is still living. We had Ida Gray, the dentist, Gladys West, the mathematician with the GPS. We had Sylvia del Villa, and we had Florence Kennedy. And then we also had Erna Brodber. Who am I missing? If I covered everybody. Mbokomu was the first one we did. Agatha, who, paid the ultimate price with her life. The ones that really have resonated with me the most, I can't say favorite, but would be Erna Brodber, who is still alive. And I've actually sent her a message to see if we can get her to come and speak to us. And then also Sylvia del Villa. And the reason I say both of them is, as I was researching Erna Brodber, the work that she did in interviewing the elders and then preserving those interviews and how that continues to inform the work other people are doing, I immediately started researching, okay, is there a way that I can get 2 months off from work and go and do some research in Opobo, which is where my ancestors, we came from Bonny, and before that, the Nile Valley and all of that. But Opobo is our ancestral home at this time. And I started researching grant proposals because I was like, I still have bills, still have kids in college, all of that. But I would love to, maybe not 90, but can I interview 30, 50 and preserve that? So she really did have an impact on me. And then Sylvia, who was the Afro-Puerto Rican actress, you guys might remember, my makeup was very different. In fact, my father saw it and he was like, that looks fetish. But she's someone who pushed Blackness into the center of Puerto Rican cultural policy rather than its margins. And I feel that is essential work for us all to be doing at this time, is to rediscover our roots and to claim them and center them. And so those are the two that right now, in terms of the work that I'm doing and how I'm living, of all the 12 that we did this season, if you will, those two really are informing what I want to do next.
I was also reminded that
someone said Flo Kennedy was the business.
Was the business, yeah.
Flo Kennedy would definitely get me disbarred. She will have them filing ethics charges against me if I let her spirits dwell, because she was no mess.
You are listening to Women and Resistance with Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, where we honor the voices of women who have shaped history through courage and defiance. If you're finding these stories inspiring, take a moment to subscribe, share, and support this platform. Together, we amplify the voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to the conversation. I do cycle from time to time. So part of the cycling means you use your sat-nav navigation. And so when I was inputting destination and how to return the route, Gladys West sprung to mind. I was like, okay, now you know time, place, and here is someone who, although on the other side of the world, does impact your life. Now, if I didn't know, I would just have gone about my day. Yeah. But the fact that I knew who was, instrumental to having that piece of technology in our everyday lives, is sort of enriching in its own little way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Y'all keep the questions coming. I'm
Exactly.
doing in the chat right now.
Yeah. So speaking of the world Erna Brodber wanted to create, do you think it's something we ought to embrace? And I don't just mean, just hear about it and move on, but it could actually be our own little marionage when it comes to what we're currently experiencing now, which is
you mean the black space that she created?
Yeah, the black space. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of women, even men, just having, maybe this weekend, you take one person's house, you go there, you sit, you read, you discuss, just away from the normal, even bring the kids around so that way they have this sort of, not just the usual holidays where we have Thanksgiving, but, be intentional about the idea of creating something. She was intentional because she resigned her position and went back and said, you know what? I am going to create this while I still have the strength, the mind, and the capacity to do so. Yeah. Earlier, you said, what are we doing in order to better our situation? That might be one of the things to take away from this past season, which is that's practical and realistic. It doesn't have to be large. It could just be 10 people that you feel share your outlook on life and sit, discuss, plan, do whatever. But that way, these are people that are on your, how can I say it? Your go-to bag. These are the people that would be, as they would say, your backup when needs be.
So I would say that what she's doing is both revolutionary and not, in the sense that we used to have these spaces, even though we may not have necessarily called it, black spaces in that way. When I think of women farming together, when I think of an African braiding shop, if you've ever gone to a barber shop, a black barber shop, that is a black space. And we are having conversations on everything. Your hairdresser is your therapist.
Your shrink.
There's a whole lot going on. But I think that what she's done, particularly given the assaults on our mind, is to be very intentional about decolonizing that space. So it's not just that we came together because, like fraternity, people come together and play basketball, people come together and drink, play spades, whatever. So it can be a black space. But what is your intention for that space? Is it just to momentarily escape the trauma of the existence, the black existence across the world? Or are you intentional about we are building something? And so when she's talking about we have our summer school and we're teaching the young people and she's writing plays and they're reenacting their own history. I think it's that intentionality of the spaces that makes all the difference. Because like you said, we come together for Thanksgiving, Juneteenth, all kinds of stuff. But what are we doing? Here in my community for Juneteenth, oh my God, we had line dancing up left and right here, this, that, but not really talking about the things that would free us besides entertainment. So, but that is certainly something that all of us can do, is to be very intentional about creating those spaces and working to make those spaces safe spaces. Because I have been in black spaces that were not safe for me either. And that is a problem.
Okay.
Mama Toya says, hey, Mama Toya, by the way, you all tune in to Rethinking Freedom next Monday at 7 a.m. because Mama Toya is one of my guests and she is amazing. Grandmothers for Literacy, creating space as well. Okay. But she says, Aya, do you ever stop? If you do, please don't. I love what you're doing. You know what? It's really interesting that you would say that, particularly for those of you who also happen to be in Nubia and may have been part of office hours this past Monday, something that Dr. Carr was saying on Monday night. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go join Narrative with a KNARRATIVE, and you can join Nubia, and then you can get more of this information. But something that they were saying towards the end about work being restorative. I do stop. I love the water. I walk every day, sometimes run. I'm in my garden. I'm reading. For some people, that still looks like work. For me, it's very restorative. And I'm also just in a mind space where it's time is going to go by, right? We don't know if it's going to be 7 more minutes you have, or 7 more years, or 70 more years. But what do you want to do with that time? And in this phase of my life, I want my life to count. I want to have an impact that starts with me and how I live, but also how I show up for other people. And so I love fiercely. I love deeply until you tell me that my love is not what you want, in which case I will, as my people will say, I will respect myself and I will take myself out of the equation. But I don't want to stop till I die. I'm having fun. I'm tired. I wouldn't even sugarcoat that. There are many days when I'm falling asleep with my laptop burning a hole in my lap. But I feel really good about the work that I am doing. I often fail more than I succeed. But I think it was Michael Jordan who said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And he was also talking about, how many more misses he had than shots made. But if he didn't at least attempt the shot, he wouldn't even have had a chance to make it. So that's, I'm just like, hey, I got breath today. Let's get up. Let's get up, do what we can. And at the end of the day, if I gave it what I had, then, it's all good. So thank you for asking that question.
Okay. And from Miss June, she says, which of the characters that most identifies with your activism and advocacy?
Ooh, Miss June, Mama June. Let's see. Okay, so we've got Mona Mia, Millie and Christine McCoy, Mary Fields. Mary Fields is a bad, bad, bad sister. Josephine Baker, I am not going to be a caricature for whiteness, even if it gets me some resources to do other stuff. You know what? I think it would be Agatha, because Agatha was, so Agatha is the female prime minister in Uganda.
Rwanda.
And she was Rwanda, sorry. And she was part of, quote unquote, the ruling class, the ruling ethnic group.
Yeah.
And the reason she was killed, she was murdered, and so was her husband, was because she was actually advocating for the ethnic group so she was Hutu, and she was actually advocating on the part of the Tutsis and saying, hey, we need to make sure that everybody has access to resources equally, and so on and so forth. And so she was seen as a traitor to her group. And she knew that the position she was taking was not popular, but she also knew it was the right thing. And I would say that in terms of activism, at least from what I have researched about her, that would be the person that I most relate to. That's a great question. I had to think about that one. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so, what we're doing here is sort of, you said restorative justice. Here we would say restorative knowledge, because this woman existed and we're bringing them into the consciousness of those who might not have come across them.
So they existed and they left so many lessons. So if you start with Mbokomu, you can call her a myth if you want to, but then, is Jesus Christ the myth? Don't know.
Greek gods.
However the Greek gods, all of that. But she came down from the sky and was like, okay, what can I do? And she planted a garden and built a household out of nothing but dirt, patience, and a refusal to disappear. And that's pretty much like what Black women have done, at least for the last 500 plus years. And of course, in her case, we know even beyond that is when you look at all of these women, whether they were cast out, whether they were boxed in, whether they were sold, whether they were exiled, whether they were underestimated, whether they were toyed around with, Josephine Baker, how many marriages by the time she was 16 years old, packing her bags and like, yeah, I'm going across the ocean and I don't even know what I'm going to find there. But having that kind of courage, some of us don't want to cross the street or go to the next city. And so their lives are instructive. And I think their lives should give all of us a little bit more courage that whatever you are experiencing, whatever your obstacles, you're not the first. Unfortunately, you won't be the last, but you can still make something out of that life. Elizabeth Toro used her body in modeling and film, but then also her brain, and became the first female lawyer from Uganda.
Yeah.
Ida Gray, the first Black woman to earn a dentistry degree at a time when both her race and her gender were disqualifying, and built a business, married, still lived a good life. Of course, Gladys West, who was a farm girl.
Yeah, went across town. I said across town, across country.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Florence Kennedy, one of the first Black women to graduate from Columbia Law, and they were going to refuse to admit her. And she was like, okay, you want this business, I'll sue you. And then just how defiant she was. I don't know if you guys remember that episode. I know you were blushing through that whole episode, but she was like, yeah, who really controls their body? You wives who feel you're so respectable, or the streetwalker? Because the streetwalker gonna get paid. You do all of this work to have misses, and I'm not putting that down. And then, of course, let's not forget Dada Masiti, who was also sold.
Yeah.
But then came back and used her spirituality, her religion, her love for writing and poetry in Kenya to help shape Islamic practice on that whole Swahili coast. So even at a time when so much was against her. So I say all of that to say we don't have any excuses for not showing up and it's not about comparing yourself to anybody, because like I said, all of these women were different. It's just doing the best you can do.
Yeah, being present. Yeah, being present and being intentional. Miss Lorna wants to know, what was your favorite costume and least favorite costume or wig?
Ooh. And like I told you all, I don't go back in and watch. And I was thinking the other day that I should probably start taking pictures before we go on live, so that I have a catalog. The one that was most fun to do was Sylvia del Villa, because it was very dramatic, and that's not a look that I would normally wear. And if I had walked to the grocery store with that look, I don't know. People would probably have started throwing holy water on me. It's always interesting getting dressed, because I'm talking to them because some of these women lived, decades, right?
Yeah.
So am I doing a younger Josephine Baker, or am I doing an older Josephine Baker when she was down and out on her lock? Am I doing banana skirts Josephine Baker? No, we're not doing banana skirt Josephine Baker. But for me, even in having that conversation with them as to, okay, which look do you want me to go with? There's something humbling about the sisters who are they're not show business people, so they're just very regular, if you will. And understanding how, though they will not be considered slay queens, you all know what I mean, sophisticated, they still did great work. And so what does our appearance say about us? What are we trying to achieve with how we choose to show up in the world? So favorite costume. Of course, they wouldn't call it a costume because that's how they showed up in life. But for me, yes, I suppose it would be a costume. And most of these things are in my closet. I just try to play around with them. I don't know. Okay, no, plain, I shouldn't say plain because it's not plain. One of them just spoke up right now. Trying to share the twins, I think was fun and really creative. Probably the biggest part or challenge I have with dressing like these women is getting my hair under those wigs. And Adesoji would tell you, as soon as the camera stops running, I'm taking everything off because it's so tight on my head. There are times when I feel like I'm getting a headache. I don't know how, no offense to anybody, and possibly, I'm not getting them sized well or whatever. These are cheap things. I have some friends who've also donated wigs to me, but just trying to get my hair under those wigs is like a big issue.
I'll tell you one that
Which one?
It will probably be Mary Field.
Why?
Remember because she had the gun, and there was a time when what was it? You asked the question, and so obviously because she was known to be very handy with the gun, and so you said something along the lines of, "What did you say? Speak up now!" And people were
being intimidating, like Mary Fields, huh?
I would say, yeah, that character really stood out. Which character or lady would you like to go back to and expand on? Wow. Okay.
You know what? I would actually like to expound on Josephine Baker. And there's so many books on her. And unfortunately, no, I have not read every single book. I did read 3. But that woman was made of something different. From her childhood, her ability to express herself, all the no's, the sexual assault she went through, how she was able to keep a sense of self, and then that dream that she had for that rainbow, what did she call it? Her rainbow family. But then, of course, it ends up that many of her children could not stand her. So whether there was a sense of grandiosity and
she also lost.
I can change the world, but maybe I'm not spending enough time processing myself. I would like to get more into her mind, her spirit. Like, I would think a person like her would have been drinking or using drugs just to cope with her life, but looks like she was just high off of life. Who else would I like to expand on?
Elizabeth Toro?
Who?
Elizabeth Toro?
Nah. Now, the thing about Elizabeth Toro is the first time I saw Elizabeth Toro was on the cover of a magazine when I was a teenager. And it was just this regal, dark-skinned woman with this neck that went on forward. Yeah. It felt like 2 feet of neck. And it was a side profile, and I was just struck by it. Just redefining this idea of beauty. Being very European. Although, you could say she had, certain features or whatever. But she was, in her own way, uncompromisingly African. But no, I wouldn't want to expound on her, although she's also lived a very interesting life, how she navigated, working with Idi Amin and not succumbing to being one of his, multiple wives. Who else would I want to expound on? Let's say Gladys West. Because if you go and look at the pictures of her or even interviews with her, very quiet, unassuming woman. But, we have a saying about still waters that run deep. This woman dealt with, losing 2 children towards the end of her pregnancy. But what she was still able to accomplish. And after retiring, very unassuming, serving in her community, not even highlighting, this is who I am. We live in a society now where it's like, do you know who I am? This and that. And it really wasn't until one of her sorority sisters was like, you did what? And started to spread the word. I'm drawn to people like that. People who just put their heads down and do the work.
You're on the stage.
Yeah. I would want to expound a little bit on what it was about her that could come from the poverty and where she started. And despite all of the challenges, mathematics back in those days, right? To keep pushing herself and to keep showing up and to keep excelling We need more of that kind of spirit today, because now, you hear us talking about, imposter syndrome, and maybe I don't fit in here, and we're psyching ourselves out and all of that. So I want to expound on her and help teach my age and younger how we can have such a deep belief in ourselves, have such faith that it literally allows us to move mountains.
Okay. So, question outside of the women, the books. It must cost a pretty penny to have all those books next to you to be able
should I move my camera so you can see all the books?
The organized chaos, you mean? Okay.
Yeah. I've run out of space on my bookshelf. On my bookshelves, I have shelves in my office. I have shelves in my meditation area. I have two bookshelves right next to my bed that are overflowing. And I built bookshelves in my garage. And once all these kids leave, I'm probably just going to
turn their rooms into...
take their beds out and put more shelves. But what was your question again? Sorry.
So the question is, it must cost a pretty penny to buy those books. Obviously, keep them. And what plans do you have for this?
Great question. So, everybody has their vices. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't buy purses. I don't buy makeup. Most of my clothes are like 20 plus years. Like I just, buy regular stuff and just keep wearing it. It's an incentive to also work out, because I don't want to buy new clothes. And so books are the one, major vice that I have. And I'm still disciplined because I still have kids to raise and other stuff. We're not going to go homeless, but I indulge when it comes to books, and they make me very happy. And I've always loved to read. So, but I to the extent that, I only go to a hairdresser once a year. So some things that other people spend money on, nails, whatever. Again, no judgment. Everybody do what makes you feel happy. If I'm not paying the hairdresser, I can buy 2, 3, 4 books, or sometimes more, depending on where I'm shopping. And so that makes me happy. And I just do my own hair myself. And yeah. So
question
I think that was the first part of your question. What am I going to do with the books? I haven't given that a great deal of thought. In my estate plan, what I have said is, I would like the books to stay in the family, and God willing, I have grandkids, great grandkids, whatever, because I have some first edition books around here. Don't sell my stuff. But I've said, to the extent that your family may not necessarily have the same passion that you do, then I would want it to go to a library. And, God willing, we're able to build the library in Opobo into, a serious place. It's a serious place now, but, it's got like 800 books. So we've got a long way to go. But yeah, I would like to see it where other people are enjoying them the way that I have and the way that I do.
Okay, that said, you have a question, you take the first part, and I'll come after you.
Yes, the books. About how many books do we both read a week? LOL. Well, let's see. I'm currently reading Hakim Abdi's book. I'm also reading another book on the spirit in the water. And I am reading Pretty Principles, which is a book that we're going to be using for our mentoring program, Intelligent and Talented Girls. So typically in a week, I'm going to finish 2 to 3 books minimum. There's some books that take a little longer, like Hakim's book, I'm not going to be able to do in 1 week. But with Women in Resistance, there have been weeks where just for that particular character, I am going through 2 to 3 books. And then we're reading a book in Nubia, and I'm reading this other thing for some other project that I'm doing. And so, yeah, minimally 2 to 3 books a week.
So at the moment, this is what I'm reading. So that's Hakim Abdi, who we're interviewing this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So for part of refreshing for African News Review. I'm reading that. I'm also reading this, Yoruba mythology.
Yoruba myths. Okay.
And, more contemporary readings, neoliberal doctrine, the invisible doctrine. So again, sometimes the books, you just walk past the books and you just grab one and it's like, oh, have I read this? Okay, let me see what's in there and, stuff like that. That's how I tend to read. But obviously for Women and Resistance, she does majority of the reading. I do a bit, but clearly not as much as because she is basically going to be steering the ship. And good news, Mama Aya just said.
Yeah, I just responded to her on that. Thank you so much. We're going to be sending actually a container of books in September.
Okay.
To Nigeria, because there are too many now for me to say I'm going to put them in my suitcase. We've had quite a few people dropping off and mailing and asking me to come pick up books. And yeah, we're very, very grateful. Let's see. There was a question that I saw. Let me go back. How long does it take you to decompress after coming out of character to rejoin your family? The truth be told, sometimes I don't get to decompress before I join the family. There are times when I get off this and I'm rushing to a child's activity, or when my parents were visiting, I've got to go put food on the table for them. And I'm still in whatever I was dressed in doing that. And it's later in the evening after I've, fulfilled my other roles that I can now just sit down and but at least during the process of getting the whatever I'd used off, getting the makeup off, if I'd used any makeup, I'd always appreciate the days when I don't have to put makeup on. Even that process, I'm very intentional about, okay, I'm taking you off. I'm at least I'm attempting to take you off. I'm shedding this and that strong energy that comes, and asking them permission to please allow me to go back and do what I need to do. But there are some of them who, even in preparing, like that whole week, I don't feel myself. There's some of them who make me very anxious, just depending on their lives and what happened. There's some of them who are very exacting. Because they're like, I want you to use my accent. And I'm like, I'm not a trained actress and I'm not trying to do that. If your spirit is able to come out in the way that I sound like you, great. But otherwise, do not stress me out. I'm doing the best I can. And there's some that have required me to go to the water, to light a candle, to pray, and to just be like, okay, let me go, especially because we've got a week. I've got to prepare for the next person. It just differs, but sometimes just because I don't live alone and I still have, other roles that I play, it's just like, we just got to roll with it. And if they coming along, they come along. But the one of the spirits that was just, oh my God, so hard to shake was Nina Simone. Nina Simone, I was melancholy for once I put her on the list that someone else going to cover, it was just like all of these emotions, and getting her to give me space after, presenting her information was a hard road to go. Yeah. Okay, let's see if there are any other questions in here. In terms of the reading, I think I've mentioned this before, maybe not in Women in Resistance. So born in the U.S., but went back to Nigeria before I turned 4. And then when I came back at 17, there was that issue of people judging your level of intelligence by your accent. So I not only was reading and trying to learn more about the American culture, I was also listening to how people who are seen as intelligent or learned or whatever, how they spoke. And I would, go to the library and check out cassette tapes. I'm aging myself, put them on my Walkman and constantly listen. But one of the times when I was listening to one of those tapes, they talked about a speed reading course. And I ended up taking it. And that has made all the difference because I can read a lot faster than I think normal, maybe, and still comprehend. And that has really come in handy doing all of this work, because we also have to read for African News Review. So they're like different reason. And I've got to read all these legal briefs and all of that stuff. So Mama Toya, which episode are you asking about? Mama Peggy has to leave. Thank you for joining. Something else that I wanted to say, if people, you can keep posting more
Questions?
More questions, is looking at what connects all of these women. So every one of them was underestimated by the institutions around them, sometimes family members, So you look at Josephine Baker's life, she certainly had a hard road to travel with, even within her own family. So whether you look at slavery, colonial law, the medical establishment, the church, a genocidal state, there was always an institution that was in their way. What was interesting with this group is, and I'd have to go back and think about the other women we've covered, is none of them resisted by just saying, I give up necessarily. And, Florence Kennedy stopped practicing law at a certain time, but she didn't give up. She was fighting in other ways. So you see them staying, in medicine or diplomacy, staying on the stage, in the mosque, in the archive, and doing work to rebuild those spaces from within. And we can argue whether, should they just have abandoned it? Okay, abandoned it, and then what? Or was it helpful for them to try to transform from within? You also see motherhood, sisterhood, and your chosen family recur as the engine of protection and legacy. So Monamia guarding her daughters, Millie and Christine funding Black schools, Mbokomu founding a lineage, Elizabeth Toro trying to protect her brother and protect her family's lineage and do the best she could also for her country with all the craziness that was going on. So you just see that over and over again. Of course, for too many, you also see them treated as public property, whether they were enslaved, whether they were exhibited, whether they were colonized, assassinated, doubted. And each one asserting their agency over themselves. And then I think this is really important for us to see that most of these women, if they ever got flowers, those flowers were not instantaneous. Like their vindication was almost always delayed. So Gladys West's role in GPS surfaced decades later. Could she have been on the speaking tour making $30,000 per 1 hour appearance? Possibly. But that wasn't, the path that she traveled. Even Ida Gray and Elizabeth of Toro, who were the first in their fields, in their area, only now being taught. And still so many people have never heard of Ida Gray. Even, I would hazard a guess, if you go and quiz 100 Black dentists, we're not even talking about others, Black dentists, and say, who was the first Black female dentist, or do you know Ida Gray? People will be like, is it Ida B. Wells? Like, because, there can only be one Ida. And then seeing
Mary Fields,
that their debt has to be paid forward. It's not a personal trophy. So what am I doing for the next? Not just, I was the first, the last, the everything. But how do I open doors for other people, clearing ground that they may not even fully themselves ever walk on? So again, look at Agatha, what she sacrificed her life for. And today we are talking about, Rwanda is thriving, so on. There's still some, tensions here and there. I would also say that you see the thread of owning your own image, strategy. So Josephine Baker was the one that was like, okay, you all have these stereotypes about Black women. I'm going to fully own it and get paid. So, you look at some of the singers today with the BBLs and other things, maybe that's one strategy. To each person is going to look at things differently. Ownership of your own image, including Millie and Christine McCoy. Yes, we are going to stand and we're going to be fashionable and, so on and so forth. And when they got to a certain point, and no, you don't get to touch us in that way anymore. Also understanding how important memory keeping is. And it may not be glamorous work. So whether you look at Dada Masiti with her writing, you look at Erna Brodber, you look at Sylvia del Villa, like, how do we keep our memories?
And also in the course of time, impact of Christianity and all the Abrahamic religions has sort of wiped away to a larger extent, the memories of people of Mbokomu. Outside of the region where one would have known her, where you expect people there to project her image onto the world, because of that impact, largely erased. So what we do here on a week-by-week basis, and we have our regulars, again, part of spreading.
Shout out to our regulars. Thank you so much, because just as many of these women were ignored in their lifetimes, we are still ignoring them. But, we're interested in other things. So shout out to all of you who
make it a duty.
So there's some of you who are just like, you're here before we are. And that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, it's part and parcel of what we do here. So next week, we'll continue we'll start the next season with Sarah Rector. Who Sarah Rector is, again?
There was just a movie about her, so.
Yeah, so let's underscore the point of what she is and what she's about. So join us next week, sister. Any final thoughts?
For all of the women and for all of the men who love women, talking about how these women presented physically, I'm just going to say, beauty shows up in different packages. People feel comfortable in different ways. And yes, there is a time and a place for everything. So I'm not making an argument for bonnets in class or in the grocery store, the airports. But just even in trying to dress up as these women, yes, some of them have, their clothes up to their collar, to their necks and everything. And then others are a little bit more what we would consider free. It's always a balancing act for me, like, okay, how much? Because, hey, I'm still living and I don't want nobody to come see this and like, oh. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of times that I've had some wardrobe malfunctions that I didn't realize I was having, because once I go into them, I'm not even looking at myself at the screen. But there was one that I did catch later a little bit because my parents were watching it. And I was like, oh, my God, if that slipped down anymore, I was mortified. But these women were very comfortable, at least it appears to me, with how they chose to present and just how God physically made them. And I think more of us should try to find that freedom and embrace it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of freedom, grant everybody else is. And we'll continue the work next week. Again.
How many women now?
It's 74. 74 now. So 74. And, started with, can you remember?
Billie Holiday. Yeah, of course I remember. She's the one who started the whole dressing up. I wasn't planning to dress up as anything except just come and tell their stories. And she was like, say what? Do you know who I am?
You have to turn up. You have to turn up. So next week it's the turn of Sarah Rector. And we hope to see all of you next week. From me, it's good night from sister.
Please like, please share, please subscribe, please hit the notification bell and help the stories of these amazing women get out to the world.
Yeah. So until next week. By the way, this Sunday we are interviewing Professor Akim Abdi, Pan-Africanism history. So let's see how we're all connected or how we can be much more connected. So until Sunday, it's good night and God bless. That is it for this episode of Women and Resistance. Thank you for joining us in amplifying the voices of women who challenged injustice and changed the course of history. Be sure to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. Together, remember, we honor the past, act in the present, and shape the future. Until next time, stay inspired and stay in resistance.